Welcome back into the Daily Dose. I'm your host, Jeff Hansen. As always, the show is brought to you by Give'emHellBrigham.com and by CougarSportsInsider.com, part of the 24/7 Sports Network. Thank you so much for your support of the show. If you haven't done so yet, please take a minute, subscribe to this channel, like the video, leave a comment, hit the notification bell. All of those little interactions help us out a ton as we try to grow our platform here on YouTube. So thank you for your support so far, and thank you in advance for your continued support of us here at the Daily Dose. Today, we're turning to the godfather of preseason college football, Phil Steele. His 2023 magazine is out, it's published, and it's up to date with transfers as of last week. And it's packed. It's jam-packed with information. Anybody who has followed Phil Steele, I think this is edition 30 of the magazine now. So anybody who's followed Phil Steele over the course of the last 3 decades know how much information he includes in this magazine. One of my favorite things that he does every year is he looks at every player at every position and does a pre-draft ranking of draft-eligible players for next year's draft. This year, he's got a couple handfuls of BYU guys included in his rankings. So let's go through them. Let's see where he ranks each BYU player in his pre-draft rankings and kind of talk about whether we agree or disagree with where Phil Steele, with what Phil Steele thinks the pro prospects are of the BYU players on the roster. And it starts at the quarterback position. Kedon Slovis checks in as Phil Steele's number 31 draft-eligible quarterback. And that seems low. I mean, that seems really, really low. Slovis, I don't think he's a first or second round type guy. I mean, he would have to put up gaudy numbers in order to reach that level. But Slovis has enough of a track record in college that if he can get back to form, he doesn't even have to put up those crazy numbers that he did as a true freshman. If he can get closer to his sophomore or junior year at USC type numbers, then I think that Kedon Slovis finds his way into the draft. Aaron Roderick has proven that he can develop quarterbacks, give them NFL skills in Zach Wilson and in Jaron Hall. So I think that helps Slovis. I think 31, still is a little bit too low on where he slates Slovis right now. But you can't ignore what happened at Pitt. And so I get it. Pitt was not great for Slovis, but I think that was more about Pitt than it was about Slovis. I think Slovis climbs these rankings as the year goes on, and I could ultimately see him checking in somewhere in the mid-teens by the time the season is over. At running back, number 28 is Aiden Robbins, the UNLV running back. This is another one, kind of like Slovis, that it's a different way to be underrated, but I think Robbins is underrated because he had 1,000 yards at the Mountain West Conference level. I just don't think he's getting the respect that he deserves. But I don't think this is about people writing him off like maybe people have written off Slovis. I think this is about people not knowing about how good Aiden Robbins really is. So this is another one, especially given the track record of BYU's running backs over the last few seasons. This is another one where I see Aiden Robbins climbing draft rankings as the season goes on. If he could stay healthy, he's going to put up monster numbers behind this offensive line. Isaac Rex checks in as the number 17 tight end in Phil Steele's rankings. That's about right. I think from a talent standpoint, Isaac Rex is a top 10, maybe top 8 guy. I think he's very, very good. That ankle injury that he suffered against USC a couple of years ago was serious. I mean, he was very clearly not 100% last year, and I don't know that he's ever going to be back to where he was pre-injury. That was a gnarly injury. It was amazing that he was playing at all, and that's something that NFL scouts are going to take into account as they evaluate Isaac Rex. So 17 feels right, but from a talent standpoint, I think he's better than that. He blocks. He's a very willing blocker, very capable blocker. He's got NFL size. When he's healthy, he's fast, he's athletic. I think Isaac Rex can do a lot of things. Maybe he doesn't get drafted, but I think he finds his way onto an NFL roster next year. But that injury and his age being a return missionary is something that the NFL scouts are going to take into account, and that might ultimately pull him out of the draft. Mason Wake comes in number 3 fullback. Yeah, not much to complain about there. Air Wake is a great fullback prospect. He's done it. He's got great film. He's proven that he's versatile and multiple, can do a variety of different things. He's not just a rhino that lines up in I formation. He can give an offense a variety of different looks as an H-back. I think Mason Wake, I think he could sneak his way into the draft. We're starting to see more H-backs, more fullbacks coming back into the NFL. Maybe Mason Wake finds his way there. No problems whatsoever with him being the third-ranked fullback this year. Connor Pay checks in as the center at the number 33 center, and that feels low. I don't think that Connor Pay goes to the NFL this year. I think he will need another 2 years at BYU, but I do think number 33 is exceedingly low. I think that's somebody who hasn't seen enough of Connor Pay, hasn't seen the difference that when he's on the field versus when he's not on the field. It's a tangible difference. I think Connor Pay is very, very good. I'd have him inside the top 20 personally. But Phil Steele has him at number 33, and that doesn't sit right with me. Kingsley Suamataia checks in as his number 4 offensive tackle, and that's fine. I mean, anybody inside the top 5 at the offensive tackle position, you really can kind of interchange them however you'd like. Everybody's going to have a personal preference. Maybe Joe Alt is firmly established as number 1, and 2 through 5 kind of interchangeable however you prefer. So I have no issues with Kingsley being at number 4. I personally think he's the second or third best tackle in this class, but really anybody inside the top 5 is a first-round grade, and so you feel pretty good about that no matter what. The next one is a little bit surprising. Phil Steele ranks Ian Fitzgerald as the number 63 offensive tackle in his pre-draft rankings. I don't know how you get there. I mean, he played at Southwest Missouri State. He played a lot, but he hasn't played at the FBS level, the Power 5 level. I don't know what kind of film that Phil Steele has really seen. I think Ian Fitzgerald has the tools to be a very productive player, but to see him on an NFL draft ranking, even if it is as low as number 63, that was a surprise to me. I don't know that he even starts for BYU this year. So that one was a little bit of a head scratcher, but hey, we'll take head scratchers in the right direction if you're a BYU fan. Moving to the defensive side of the ball, Tyler Batty is Phil Steele's number 64 defensive end. And that's about right. I think from a potential standpoint, when you look at Tyler Batty, when an NFL scout looks at Batty, you want to see more. All he has to do is produce. And I think he will produce in this new defensive scheme, working with Kelly Papinga, working with Jay Hill. I think he's poised for a very, very big season. But if you look at what he's done so far in his career, it's hard to make a case that he has lived up to his potential. I don't think that's his fault. I think that's the scheme's fault. But be that as it may, if you're an NFL scout, you have to look at that. And so 64 feels about right. I do think he could climb in a meteoric way throughout this season. I think Batty is going to be great for BYU. He's big, he's fast, he's strong, he's explosive off the line of scrimmage. He's got great length. He checks every box that you want out of an elite pass rusher. The scheme hasn't supported him, right? The scheme has failed him so far in his BYU career. I don't think that will be the case this year, and I think he could find his way into the draft now that he's playing in a much better defensive scheme. But for now, 64 feels about right. Max Tooley checks in as Phil Steele's number 29 outside linebacker, and that's good. That's completely fair with me. Tooley is a little bit undersized for an NFL outside linebacker. He has an injury history. And he's had some inconsistencies in his play over his career. He's a playmaker, and he makes more highlight plays than just about anybody on BYU's roster. He's a guy that you want to have on that roster no matter what. You want him on the field as much as possible. If he can maintain some consistency this year and play at that playmaking ability throughout the game, I think he could find his way into the draft. But he is old. He does have that injury history. So 29 feels about right for me. Moving on, Ben Bywater checks in as Phil Steele's number 10 inside linebacker. That's higher than I thought Bywater would be. But when you look at what he's done on film, even in a lackluster defensive scheme, he's proven that he can make plays. He's proven that to be a reliable enough tackler. I think he's poised to do much bigger things with Justin Enna and Jay Hill calling the shots for him. They were frequently, linebackers across the board at BYU were frequently out of place, misaligned, out of position. They missed tackles. And when it happens across the board like it did for BYU last year, you have to blame the scheme more than you blame the player. Now, ultimately, Bywater could prove that statement to be false if he comes out and struggles this year, but I don't think he will. I think he's got all the tools to be really, really good. I think he's got the scheme now to support him and highlight those tools. Number 10 feels maybe a little bit higher than I would have had him just based on what we've seen so far, but the potential's there, and Phil Steele has been a big Ben Bywater fan for a while. Number 54 at the inside linebacker spot is AJ Vongphachon. I probably would have flipped those two myself. I think Vongphachon is an NFL guy. I think he's very, very good. I think he's already proven to be an NFL guy based on what he's done at Utah State. And I think he's only going to prove that and cement that status more here at BYU this year. But the combination of Bywater and Vongphachon, and BYU has two very, very good linebackers there, and both of them could find their way into the NFL at some point. Maybe not drafted, certainly not highly drafted, but I think both of them will find their way onto an NFL roster in 2024. Some omissions from Phil Steele's list that kind of surprised me. Caleb Etienne, I'm going to chalk that up to him being a transfer and not having a team, because the fact that Ian Fitzgerald was on the list, but Caleb Etienne was not, is confusing to me. I think Etienne, who will be a senior, he's going to start at right tackle opposite of Kingsley Suamataia. If you have any if you think that Ian Fitzgerald is at all an NFL player, then you have to say that Caleb Etienne also is an NFL player. So that was kind of a surprising omission for me. Eddie Heckard, another one I'll probably chalk up to Phil Steele not seeing enough Weber State football to know how good Eddie Heckard really is. He's going to surprise some people. He really will surprise people this year. He is an elite cornerback. I think he will go down. It's only 1 year, but I think he will go down as one of the best cornerbacks that has been at BYU in the last 20 or 30 years. If he could stay healthy, Heckard is legit and absolutely an NFL draft prospect. And then finally, Cody Epps. I was a little bit surprised that with the number of wide receivers that that Phil Steele lists on his pre-draft rankings, I was a little surprised to not see Cody Epps sneak in at the bottom of that list. I think he has NFL potential, obviously needs to stay healthy. If he does that, then I think you'll start seeing some late round buzz on Cody Epps going into the pre-draft cycle after the season. We'll see what happens. So those were the omissions that kind of surprised me the most. Overall, I don't have too many disagreements with what Phil Steele has. I think he got most of the right guys on the list. He has some a little higher than I would have had them, and he has a few a little bit lower. But overall, I think Phil Steele and I are pretty close to on the same page in terms of BYU's NFL draft hopes for the 2024 NFL draft. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to spend with us here at the Daily Dose. And until next time, give them hell.